I'm George Fragopoulos.
And I'm Kel Karpinski.
And this is...
Uberbusters.
Yes. We did it, Kel.
I know. Back for a third time.
Back for a third time. How does it feel to be back?
It feels good. I feel like we're missing someone, but...
We're missing Liam.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's who it is.
He's
yeah.
not here in
true.
the palatial Uberbusters studio. That is my dingy Clinton Hill apartment. But there's also a certain kind of freedom without Liam here.
I guess, yeah.
There's that kind of dictatorship that Liam brings with him.
There is a little bit of that.
Authoritarian kind of quality that he has when it comes to recording, making sure the levels are okay, making sure that...
I mean, yeah, he can get a little intense, but, yeah.
But we do miss him.
We do miss him.
Yeah.
We do miss him.
So not only are you are, I think, your first second timer, and now also our first third timer.
I am.
Yeah. So again...
Wait, am I the only... does it mean I'm the only person who's been on every season?
Yeah, I think you're the only person that's been on every season.
Awesome.
How does that feel?
I feel honored.
And again, the fame is kind of overwhelming though, isn't it?
It is so overwhelming. Like, I can't walk down the street without, people recognizing me or something. I don't know.
I was recently out in LA and I too was just constantly stopped in the streets, and it was kind of just, it was overwhelming. But yeah. I'm enjoying all the attention. I really love it. Yeah.
It's good.
So what are we talking today, Kel?
We're talking about the 1966 movie Batman.
We are, yes. Which, by the way, before we delve into it, you tweeted last night, why is this film an hour 45 minutes? And I also, by the way, had the same feeling.
It wasn't... It didn't seem that long, like, to be fair. But when I looked to see that was the running time and I was only in like 15 minutes, I was like, how the fuck are they going to drag this out for an hour 45? But it was fine, but I didn't enjoy it, I don't think. And I don't think it needed to be an hour 45, although it didn't feel like I was slogging through it, if that's fair. Like, it didn't need to be that long, but it also didn't feel like a slog. Like, I think both those things can be true.
Both those things can be true. And they should also put that quote of yours on the box, on the DVD re-release, the Blu-ray special. It was fine, says Kel Karpinski. So Batman 1966, directed by Leslie H. Martinson, written by Lorenzo Semple Jr., starring, of course, the immortal Adam West, Burt Ward. So Adam West obviously as Batman, Burt Ward as Robin, Cesar Romero as the Joker, Frank Gorshin as the Riddler, Lee Meriwether as Catwoman, and Burgess Meredith as the Penguin.
Apparently, this is the only thing that Lee Meriwether played Catwoman in as. She was not in the series, and then Eartha Kitt picked up after her in the series. Because
there was, I forgot who the other Catwoman...
I totally know her name.
Julie Newmar.
Yes.
Was Catwoman for the first season. So this film was released between the first and the second season.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. Then my timeline's a little off. So yeah, it was released between first and second season. Julie Newmar, both those. And then
Eartha Kitt
is third season.
Was the third season.
Yeah. Which also I found out that this apparently was supposed to be a pilot. They originally intended it as a pilot.
It feels that way.
They decided instead to do production between the seasons and to make it a movie.
Do you remember watching the show?
I mean, I've seen episodes here and there. Yeah. I've never, I don't know. Yeah.
Not a fan.
It's fine.
Which is funny because I definitely remember at some point, I was getting flashbacks for certain scenes from this. And I was like, okay, I've definitely seen this before, but I did not remember most of it.
Yeah.
As you also, going back to something you said earlier too about kind of the experience of watching it, and obviously we'll talk about it in a bit more detail, but I didn't think this was a good film.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sean. But I will say this, is that I did have at times fun watching it.
Yeah.
And there's the campiness of it, which obviously we'll talk about, and what it does in relationship to its source material, I think is far more sophisticated than some of the more recent Batman movies.
Oh, interesting.
We could talk about it. So I think its version of camp is, for me at least, was a bit more nuanced and just funnier than like the Schumacher versions of the Batman films.
I mean, I think it's it's like meant to be funny, whereas like some of this other stuff is like it's either like taking itself too seriously or like, you know, I was just listening to your Batman and Robin episode,
amazing episode,
and it's just like it's just like pun after pun after pun, and you're like, just fucking stop already. And like this, I feel like, I don't know, there was like a pun here or there, but it was mostly like they just like slapped bat in front of everything, which like I liked. Like, it's the bat boat, it's the bat gas, it's bat. And I was just like, whoa, this is like out of hand, but like it was enjoyable. Like, yeah, I don't know.
There were moments of enjoyment, and there were like 2 or 3 moments where I literally just laughed my ass off, and we'll maybe get to those moments.
Yeah.
I tweeted out one of them earlier today. This ridiculous scene where this man gets launched from a like, I don't know, like a Jack in the Box kind of contraption, and this mannequin just goes flying through the air and then crashes the water and then
really
blows
good.
up. And I was like, oh my God, like that's fucking hilarious. Plot wise, so Batman and Robin are called into action to stop the combined forces of the Joker, the Riddler, Catwoman, and the Penguin.
Yeah. Okay. So I had some issues with like the setup of all of this.
Okay.
Which I think that the TV show was like this, but again, like it's been a long time since I've seen episodes, but it's just like they like hand everything to Batman on like a silver platter in a lot of ways. Like they're like, let's pull up the closed circuit TV and see which of our supervillains are still at large. Well, it's these 4, so it must be these 4.
Oh yeah, there's very little of the Batman that's a detective that has
he like does like no like thinking on his own. And even like, so I mean, maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit.
Please go ahead.
But like the Riddler has like the most obscure frickin' riddles that like make no sense at all. But Batman does not solve them. Robin is like, he's got the answer like every time, like immediately. And I'm like, that made no sense.
He's the boy wonder.
I mean, he is the boy wonder.
And
but
I guess he's the boy wonder at solving riddles. But you're right. The riddles are, it takes him about 5 seconds to solve them.
Right, but again, like Batman is doing nothing. I mean, not that he's doing nothing, but I like it feels like a lot is being like handed to him.
And he's also kind of dumb as shit.
I mean, yeah, okay.
Like
if we just want to just say it. With Catwoman?
Yeah, I was watching it. It was like, and obviously, again, it has a lot to do with the degree to which this version of the character should not be taken too seriously. I totally get that. But the whole stuff about him not being able to tell like who Catwoman is both interesting because it's kind of also like reflects back on, I get it, like Batman's own like masked identity, yada yada yada. But also at points I was like, this guy's a fucking idiot.
Yeah, well, and I think
I
mean, I think it's like a consistent trope throughout with Batman, right? Like we were talking earlier about Batman Returns. Is that the one with Catwoman and
Batman Returns? The second one, yeah. And
like they have the moment where like they don't recognize each other when they're masked, and then you know like all this sort of stuff. But like you're like obviously like you're Michelle Pfeiffer and fucking Michael Keaton. Oh my God, my brain. Like you know who each other are, like obviously, but it feels so much more ridiculous in this film because
the masks.
The mask, it's like literally like just covering her eyes, but like as soon as she removes it, he's like, oh yeah, cool, and like you know. It's another level.
There's another moment or two also where I had that same kind of feeling of like, wait a minute, this guy's an idiot, and hopefully they'll come back. But it wasn't just that, but that was obviously the biggest one. So there's this weird kind of plot where it begins with them being called into action because some Commodore, whose name I can't pronounce, Schmidldop, has been kidnapped.
Yeah.
Or these villains have stolen his technology, which is a dehydrator. I believe the kids nowadays might call it a thirst trap. I'm not entirely sure if those things are one and the same.
I think they're the same.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. So they've stolen this thirst trap from him, and what they do is that this thirst trap is used to dehydrate individuals to turn them into kind of dust. So the plot is that they're apparently, again, the villains are going to use this contraption to attack the UN Security Council and turn everybody into dust, and Batman and Robin pretty much kind of have to stop them. And the subplot is, I guess the primary subplot is where they attempt to kidnap Bruce Wayne, obviously not knowing that Bruce Wayne is Batman. They want to kidnap Bruce Wayne because they want to draw Batman out so they can kill him, basically.
Right.
And they use Catwoman in this kind of really interesting, where she plays in like civilian clothes. She plays a Russian agent.
Right.
Who seduces Bruce Wayne.
Who has a Romanian Transylvanian accent. I don't know if you picked up on that.
I think it's more like Northern Siberian. Personally, I was like, oh yeah, she's clearly doing a Northern Siberian.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that was like the.
Well, on the Wikipedia
it was like
page,
very well researched.
On the Wikipedia page, it says that she spent 6 months living in Siberia to get the accent down.
Oh, okay, yeah, so that makes a lot of sense.
I think it's rather authentic, and that's basically the plot. And there's just hijinks and buffoonery.
There's a lot of hijinks and buffoonery.
So maybe we could talk about the relationship between Batman and Robin, Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson.
I would love to.
Let's do it. So you were also excited to talk about this film in particular because obviously of its campiness and obviously because of its homoeroticism, which the homoeroticism is pretty much any time in any Batman film where you see Batman and Robin. But you also tweeted out, here's your opportunity, Kel, to make amends. You said that you wanted to be on the episode with Batman and Robin.
Yeah. Because
I believe you're also a huge Chris O'Donnell stan.
I mean, I am, which I think like no one else is.
Still, or does he still look good?
He still could get it.
He's hanging in there. Yeah,
he's a guy. I mean, like I don't even know like what he's doing these days. I haven't seen him.
CSI?
Is he? I don't keep up clearly.
I think he's on a CSI, and I think he might be on. Correct me if I'm wrong, CSI fans out there. I think he's on the CSI with LL Cool J.
LL Cool J is on CSI. Yes. There are so many like CSIs and Law and Orders. Like I can't even.
I think this is CSI like Nassau County, Long Island.
Wait, really?
No, kidding. No, it definitely takes place in like some sort of major city, but it feels like there should be a CSI.
There totally should be. That's why it was very believable to me. Yeah, I mean, I've got a soft spot for Chris O'Donnell, but I also think that Batman and Robin has like a great level of camp to it, and the like homoeroticism I think is like super off the charts. And I mean, I think it's partially because it's Joel Schumacher, but I feel like there's also like a lot of other stuff happening too that's interesting to me. And one of the things that stood out in your episode on it, talking about Batman and Robin are like fighting over Poison Ivy or whatever her alter ego is or whatever, and like I think you said something about like it seems really misogynist, and I think that like maybe it is, but it's also like I think there's like another level to it of like that's the only way, like they're actually like there's desire for each other, and like it's like translating through they're fighting over this woman when really like they want to be with each other sort of thing, and like that's the only way they can express it. And I was thinking it's 1997, and I was trying to think of like what's going on in 1997 in terms of like the media and like gay portrayals and stuff. And like George Michael doesn't even come out till 1998. So like we're still, everybody's still like firmly closeted. I mean, not everyone, but you know what I mean. Like it's rough out there.
A lot's happened in the last 20 years.
It's rough out there.
It's interesting that you mentioned
20 years?
Well, more than 20 years, but yeah, I'm just rounding down. It's interesting to think about, though, also, that like what you were just saying reminded me of our episode on The Talented Mr. Ripley, which was that 94?
Yeah, I think it's 94.
So to think about also kind of the politics of the closet in that film in relationship to just 3 years later with Batman and Robin. And also, obviously, to think about, like, the chances that can or can't be taken with a huge Hollywood blockbuster like Batman and Robin,
right?
Where to have them like be openly, let's say, gay is impossible, or to kind of give that vision of the characters is impossible,
right?
So obviously, what it becomes is kind of homoerotic, and as you said, kind of this deflection of their desire through the body and the image of Poison Ivy. No, totally, yeah. Is there anything else about the portrayal of homoeroticism in that kind of, I don't know, resonates or that you remember being interesting?
It's been a really long time since I've seen it. And I can't say, but some of the things I was thinking about too, which not necessarily like the homoeroticism, but like the main character who I think is like horrible, but also like in Schumacher's hands, I feel like becomes a sort of like trumped up, like Tom of Finland type character. Like there was like I don't know. There's just like certain things like that where I'm like, okay, like I sort of like see like what you were trying to like, I don't know, infuse it with some sort of like gayness or like camp in like different ways, and like ways that were like acceptable and like maybe not like visible or like readable by like the average like moviegoer.
Right. Yeah, no, totally. And you're also referencing this article that you sent to me and Liam. Do you remember the author's name? But we'll put it in the metadata. But this interesting kind of attempt to rehabilitate the movie, because obviously,
Right.
and we talked about this also on the show, and I think I was sympathetic to Liam's kind of approach of thinking about ways in which we could talk about that film without just simply shitting on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate that.
So this article that you sent was about how it's a kind of a camp masterpiece.
Right.
And, you know, I think to some degree the author, from what I remember, of the article, does a decent job of kind of attempting to rehabilitate it. His kind of, I believe it's him, his entire argument is pretty much about that, how it's so self-aware as a parody.
Mm-hmm.
And that it really obviously leans into that. So any kind of criticism about its failure as a movie has to be taken into account with the fact that it knows it's being a self-parody of a Batman film.
Right. Absolutely.
And to some degree, I agree with that, but I'm also still not sympathetic to it because it's a terrible movie.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, like, of all the Batman movies, like, that is the one that stands out the most in my childhood. And not.
Remember seeing it in the theater?
I don't think I saw it in the theater. I honestly think that I watched it with some of my family. There's sort of, I'm the only grandchild on my mom's side of the family, and there's sort of this tradition of, like, at different holidays of sort of like all the women going off and like doing their own thing, and then like me and all the men in the family watching movies that were probably not like appropriate. I think this one was like probably the most okay, but I also watched like Deer Hunter at like age 9 because like I would get left with like all my uncles and my grandpa and like whatever. And so I'm pretty sure that I watched it with them. But I remember, like, I don't know, I remember enjoying it and like being sort of like, I don't know, like awestruck by like some of the like the imagery. Like it's all so over the top and like memorable, and like, I don't know, just like being sort of like fascinated by all of it. And like, yeah, again, like, I don't think it's a good movie. Like, I'm not saying that, but yeah, there's like a quality to it for sure.
Some of the set production, set design is incredible, and you could tell that they spend a shit ton of money making that film, and they did.
Yeah,
and it shows.
Yeah, absolutely.
So comparing, let's say, that version of Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson's relationship, how does this one kind of compare? By the way, this film is super fucking horny. I could not believe how horny this fucking children's movie was. Like, everybody wants to fuck.
Everybody wants to fuck, but also, can I say that you have said that on almost every episode this season?
I mean, that's my tagline.
That's your tagline now. Okay.
I'm gonna get it tattooed.
Okay. I just like feel like I haven't heard you say the word horny in any of the other seasons, and I've heard you say it so many times this season.
Well, because I think also, I mean, I think
Batman in general is horny.
I think he is. Yeah, totally.
Like,
it has a lot to do with the masks.
Batman as a character, but like the franchise, like the whole,
I'm gonna self-consciously not use that term in the next episode, and I'll use something else. Like,
You're gonna
everybody
use
is so
something like,
sexually aroused in this film.
I was gonna say you're gonna use something worse. Just stick with horny, or we're good.
This is it's a rated R podcast. Could just lean into the language. Is fine. Any euphemisms?
Well, I thought it was interesting when they, like, the very beginning of the film, when they get called back. Bruce and Dick are like in a Corvette, like cruising down the highway. Like, they're like literally cruising, like, not, you know, obviously not in the gay euphemistic sense, but like there's just something about like they're out for a Sunday drive together. Like, where are they headed? And then they're like called back and whatever.
But you also get that scene right at the very beginning where the filmmakers are like, oh, no, they're not gay. Where they're flying in the helicopter over a roof filled with women.
Oh, yeah.
And the women are like cheering and looking at them, and like
they're all like in bikinis.
Yeah. And they're
but
waving
also immediately after are like 4 uniformed men who also like salute them.
Yeah.
And so
the
I was
cops.
like, there's like a, you know, like everybody loves Batman and Robin.
Yeah. I tweeted about that scene too, and I was like, oh, this is definitely an homage to the beginning of Fellini's La Dolce Vita. Have you seen it?
I have not seen it.
There's a helicopter scene with this kind of statue of Jesus that's flying over, I believe, Rome.
Okay.
And I was like, oh yeah, this is La Dolce Vita. It's not a nod to La Dolce Vita, but I was like, oh yeah, it reminded me of that. But it also reminded me of it because then there's that scene where they cut to the park and the dude looks up and he's like, it's good to know. And he's looking up and he's like, it's good to know those fellas are up there protecting us. And it was kind of this almost like godlike imagery.
Yeah.
Which I found interesting. And that did also remind me of Schumacher's Batman, where there are, especially in the beginning, I believe that fourth one of these shots when they're getting dressed and they're kind of the angles are of the cameras like looking up,
mm-hmm.
and it has this kind of like godlike quality to the characters.
Yeah.
And it reminded me just like of that too. So yeah, so what else can we make about their relation? So Bruce Wayne, I think, is kind of dumb. There's also those interesting kind of psychosexual elements later on when Bruce Wayne is trying to hook up with Russian Catwoman.
Oh yeah.
And there's cameras like on the Batmobile that they could peek into and see like what's going on.
Yeah, and like Robin is like conflicted about like watching, but like wants to watch and is like, this is indecent, and like, and part of me was like, is it indecent because he's with someone who's not you, or is it indecent because it's like sexual? I don't know. And there's also like that whole moment too with, I think she calls herself Kitka, Catwoman, as her like alter ego or whatever.
She's like a long, ridiculous Russian name.
Yeah, but she goes by
yeah.
Kitka, right? And her and Bruce are like in this carriage, and she's like, close your eyes and like fantasize, and he's like, I'm almost at the climax.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my God, what is happening here?
No,
this
totally.
is like a kid's movie, right?
It
like
is,
I don't.
And then later on in the hotel room, they kiss in a way that human beings should not be kissing. This really like seems like they're just like mashing their faces together. I'm like, that's not how human beings kiss.
There's a lot of face mashing. Yeah,
there's a lot of face mashing.
I mean, I don't think it's possible that Bruce Wayne doesn't know how to kiss women. So yeah,
interesting. And you see that played out.
Oh wait, yeah. Can I say
You also forgot the moment though, also where Alfred suggests to Robin, like, oh yeah, no, we should just take a peek in just quickly and see like what's going on.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, okay. So in all of this too, like, yeah, what's Alfred's role in Bruce and Dick's relationship? And
in the one of the articles you sent me, I think it's the Sasha Torres article. So you shared this really excellent article by Sasha Torres regarding Batman in camp and pop culture, and we should talk about it. And in it, I think at some point the article makes mention of how it's that Alfred maybe was written out, or they tried to write him out at some point.
Yeah,
they killed him off basically again to like demystify or to kind of remove any sort of like homoeroticism from the comic.
Yeah.
So like, oh, this idea of like these three dudes living together is kind of weird. So let's kill one of them off and make it like less gay in some sort of weird way.
But I also feel like killing off Alfred,
he's not the one you killed.
Yeah. Like he's like obviously like Bruce's caretaker. Like that makes more sense. It's more, it's a weird dynamic, but like it's maybe more like father-son sort of thing happening. Whereas like, yeah, just leaving Batman and Robin on their own. Now they can do whatever they want because Alfred isn't watching over them, right?
The dad, the father figure is no longer there. Speaking of George Michael, the father figure is gone.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Good shout out there.
Thank you.
Try. When Bruce Wayne and Kitka are on their romantic date, they're dancing together, and they have their arms around each other, but Bruce does not actually touch her back. He is like limp wristed and is like has his hand like behind her back and is not actually like holding. He's like holding her hand, I feel like I can't. Folks aren't going to get a good visual of this, but they're holding hands. She has her arm like wrapped around his shoulder or whatever, and yeah, he just has his hand like limp wristed behind her back. And like there's like a couple things happening right there, right? Like there's the limp wrist, which is our like coded gay thing, but also like it seems like he doesn't like want to touch her or like doesn't know how to touch her, or there's like something happening there because he's supposed to be interested in her, right? But like
he falls in love with her
like instantly.
Yeah, instantly. Yeah, and I mean she is an absolute like smoke show. She's a gorgeous woman.
Yeah.
It's and it's interesting again to think. Well, I mean, now also that I'm thinking about it, I wonder like about like the kissing. I'm pretty sure maybe. Well, I mean, 1966 in the movies, you definitely could have shown like people making out.
Well, that's what I was trying to think of like other
children's
movies at the time. Yeah, because I think it's hard to sort of frame it because it is supposed to be more of like a kid's film, right? So like 1966, like sure, there was like a lot of stuff going on, but like maybe not in a kid's movie.
But they just didn't sell it well.
No.
When nobody takes, they took of that. Like, no, kiss like human beings, goddamn it, not like that.
Yeah.
It's like, this is the best we can do. It's like take 35 and it's just not working. Let's just go with it. Fuck it.
Well, there's a 1966 article about Batman in the New York Times. It's called The Cape Crusader of Camp. And there's actually a quote from from Adam West that says, with the number of homosexuals in this country, if we get that large audience, fine, just add them to the Nielsen ratings.
Yeah. Which is amazing also that it was just like that openly discussed too, I kind of think.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting. I mean, there's definitely some F-bombs dropped. They call it, one of the producers calls it like faggy and...
Is that Dozier, I believe?
And funsies, yeah.
That's the dude who was tapped to, I think, first write it, and he was kind of shocked. He's like, what am I going to do with this kind of
They called him the king of camp, and he was like, I don't like camp. It sounds faggy and funsies. Which, that sounds great. Faggy and funsies sounds great to me. Sign me up.
It sounds like an awesome punk band name.
It does.
Yeah.
I would, yeah.
So
it's the name of my next zine.
So maybe we could talk about, you should definitely make a zine about the homoerotics of Batman and Robin.
I feel like it's probably been done, but
there's also like, I mean, I figured you'd also love this because there's pirates and there's semen all over this film.
There is semen all over this
all
movie.
over this fucking film. I was like, oh my God, there's pirates. Like,
I
pirates
know, I didn't
are really
expect
gay.
the pirates. Yeah, I was very excited.
It's kind of cool. Maybe now's the time to talk about what this film is doing in relationship to camp and maybe what it's doing in relationship to pop culture. So one of the interesting things about the article that I'm not entirely sure, but this is the Torres article.
Yeah.
And I'll send the link to it if you could do a search, or maybe I'll just kind of like put the bibliographical information in the metadata. But one of the things I wasn't totally convinced about, so in the article, Torres makes this distinction about how camp is a response to pop art, and to think about the argument she makes is again that camp is a way to kind of rehabilitate the pretensions or the elitism of pop art, so that camp becomes basically a way to challenge the, again, like almost like the high modernist kind of appeal to certain aspects of pop art. And that Batman is clearly much more camp because there is this kind of much more popular, but not in the sense of like pop culture, but there's this kind of maybe democratic aspect to the character or to the medium of TV and the film. And that it's a kind of antidote to, again, the pretensions of pop art. And I wasn't entirely convinced about that argument, but anyway, I mean, I'd like to hear what you... So we should also kind of like, again, historically contextualize it. So like Sontag's Notes on Camp was 1964.
Okay. I'm glad that you knew that.
Yeah. I did some research. Against Interpretation, which is where it was recollected, came out actually in 1966.
Okay.
And again, to kind of like historically contextualize it. So the first Kinsey report was in the late 1940s, maybe like 1948. The second one was in the early 1950s. And the other interesting connection to make, which I think we've talked about before on the podcast, is Frederick Wertham, who was this psychologist who wrote this book in, I believe, 1952 and 1954 called The Seduction of the Innocent.
1954.
There you go. In which he basically took comic books and I think specifically Batman and Robin to task. He basically deployed kind of psychoanalytic criticism in the worst possible way in a really kind of homophobic attempt to illustrate how all these comics are ruining like young people. So it's interesting, I think, in the long, broader historical view of like camp, homoeroticism, queer desire, to think about 1966 in relationship, obviously, to like what's come before. And also we're only like a few years away from Stonewall.
Right.
So there's a lot there.
There's a lot. You just threw a lot at me.
But maybe we could just talk about camp.
Let's do it.
Because I'm not entirely like familiar with it also as an aesthetic.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't entirely buy the argument that it's like a response against pop art. And like, I think, yeah, I don't know. To me also, like, pop art to me is like not necessarily the most like elitist thing either. Like, isn't it trying to like,
I agree,
take like the sort of, I mean, like, you know, not the biggest Warhol fan, but I think that like, you know, he's trying to take like really like ordinary objects and like show how like prolific they are, and show, or not, maybe prolific isn't the word, but like ubiquitous. Yeah, I guess that's what we're looking for, right? Like how ubiquitous these objects are in our life. I mean, it's like, you know, it's the Campbell soup can, it's Marilyn Monroe, it's all this stuff. So I think that like, yeah, that doesn't make sense to me. Because
I see them as intimately related.
I think so too.
And not even necessarily antagonistic to one another.
Right. I also think like even something about the which we only see this sort of at the end in like the end fight scene in this movie, but the like the pows and the like a pow, like that feels very like pop art to me. I don't know.
Totally.
Right? Like,
because seeing those, I was reminded of like the Roy Lichtenstein's, the comic like strip paintings that he has, that specifically use that kind of imagery. And those paintings and kind of Lichtenstein becomes famous in the early, I think late 50s, early 60s.
Mm-hmm.
So the aesthetic here, and obviously again, he's clearly drawing from the original source material of the comic books, but to see it replicated on the screen in this way, to me, was a clear reference to those kind of modes of pop art.
Right. Absolutely. The thing that I think was sort of unexpected for me was I wasn't expecting, like the producers and the actors to be like as engaged in this conversation of camp at the time. Like, I wasn't expecting that to be like, oh yeah, we're doing camp, or like we're not. Like, I don't think that was like really surprising to me.
It was, yes. And that's where I felt like, holy shit, like this film in many respects, in relationship again to its self-awareness, was to me so much more sophisticated than like some of the Schumacher stuff. Because for me, the Schumacher stuff felt so over the top.
Right.
Or again, when it fell into kind of self-parody, then it was like, well, it's so, I don't know, it's like so self-reflexive that it loses any sort of nuance, and it's almost like hitting over the head.
Right.
Where in this film, when it is campy and it is ridiculous and it's queer, it's doing it, I feel like, in a very both subtle way and nuanced way, and also just like a funnier way. Yeah,
well, and it feels like they're just like trying to like have fun and be silly and like not take themselves seriously. And like, yeah, I think it's, like these later films, it becomes like a sort of like meta commentary on camp.
Yes.
Like, it's camp, but you're also like commenting on camp, and like also like it becomes like more like belabored, or like, whereas like it just feels like they're just like doing it and like just like having a good time.
Yeah, and I mean that might also have something to do with the fact that, again, because it was like the mid 1960s, it all felt novel.
Yeah.
So by the time we get obviously to like the Batman and Robin in the late 90s, it's already kind of perhaps been exhausted in certain ways, or that it's difficult, I guess, to kind of reinvigorate it, or to do something like wonderfully new with those kind of ideas and the concepts, or at least maybe within kind of the context of like Batman and Robin.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
Like, it'd be interesting to think about like what was John Waters doing in the late 90s, and how was he approaching obviously kind of these.
I want to see a John Waters Batman.
Yes, exactly. DC.
Can somebody make that happen, please? Like now.
Liam's out in LA. He should work on that.
Yeah, get it together.
Yeah, fucking. What are you doing, Liam? Liam, get in touch with your Hollywood connects.
Well, so he can do some stuff out there. We can like run down to Baltimore, and
that's right. Yeah,
like make some connections. His favorite restaurant is Prune, which is in the city, and we could go there.
There you go. Great. We're in the city.
Yeah. Where in the city?
Yeah. By the way, this is just information for anyone who wants to stalk John Waters.
It's at First and First. Although it is one of my favorite restaurants, not because of John Waters, but because it is a phenomenal restaurant, woman owned, almost entirely female staff, and
what kind of food?
Contemporary American.
You must sound ashamed to say that, contemporary American.
Because like it just like what is that? Like, I'm sorry, what is that? But she wrote the book. What is it? I don't even know. But the woman who runs it is amazing, and it is a delightful restaurant. It's at First and First in Manhattan, and the food is great. And I've never seen John Waters there, although I would love to run into John
Fingers
Waters
crossed.
there.
And if you see him, just yell at him like, "Make a Batman film! What are you waiting for?"
Yeah, I mean, it seems like up his alley. Like he'd be into that.
So any, I guess before we move on, because there are other interesting kind of political questions regarding this film, and we could take our time getting there. But any other thoughts maybe on the connection to camp or pop culture? Just want to make sure we cover our bases.
Yeah, bases should be covered. I feel like I had other things to say, but I don't remember any of them. As I'm looking at the article to see, I feel like I'm in class, and I'm like, oh, I swear I did the reading. Let me just check what I read.
Okay, no, we talked about this before we started recording, and you came up with a really cool way to describe it. So in this article, again by Torres, she makes the claim that the Bruce Wayne Batman dynamic is already in a certain way replicates a gay relationship. So that basically, like, both Bruce Wayne and Batman are representatives of like different personas within a dyad already, as, let's say, seen in a gay relationship. I thought that was really kind of fascinating.
Yes.
And you then said yes, because he is kind of...
I was... Sorry.
It's okay. We're just putting you on the spot.
I know, you're just putting me on the spot and it makes me feel comfortable. No, it's totally fine. I think there's a double closeting happening of like, you know, he's both Batman and he's gay. And so like... Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't articulately say it earlier. I'm not going to be able to.
No, you did articulate
it.
Well, just
now.
Just say the idea that he's in both identities, like rejecting versions of himself.
Right. So like, you know, he as Bruce Wayne, he, you know, can't admit that he's Batman, and you know, as this like straight hero, he can't admit that he's gay. So there's Yeah, I don't know.
He's just stuck in that closet twice over.
He's just stuck in that closet twice over. Yeah, there's also, can I just say, there is like a ton of phallic imagery in this film, which I like tweeted that. It was like the only thing I had to say while I was watching it, besides that it was long.
So the one thing, and this kind of leads to the other thing that I want to talk about is its relationship to, for example, like the Cuban Missile Crisis and Cold War politics.
Yeah.
But yeah, lots of missiles just being launched all over the place. Lots of dudes riding umbrellas.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that scene?
Yeah.
The submarines.
There's the bat poles. There's missiles. There's rockets. There's... Yeah, it's just like left and right. Yeah, they all ride these umbrellas.
The villains do.
Yeah, it is bizarre.
Yeah, but you're right. It's funny because I saw your tweet, and then 15 minutes or 20 minutes later, I saw that scene. I was like, oh, there you go, phallic imagery.
Yeah, well, and also like when they see, I forget who it is, sees them like ride by on the villains on their umbrellas or whatever, is like, oh, is it like Halloween? And so there's like some like interesting thing. I don't know. There's something happening there.
No, totally. But yes, there's a ton of phallic imagery here.
There's so much phallic imagery.
So maybe we should talk about the missiles, the Cuban Missile. So the Cuban Missile Crisis was in 1962.
Yeah.
So just a couple of years before this. So I remember seeing, you know, I was watching it last night and earlier today and seeing those missiles launch from the sea. And I was like, holy shit, that's kind of like really super dark imagery to put in a children's film.
Yeah.
And to kind of think about, again, the implications of that and just kind of how obviously it was just all over the cultural imagination in the mid-60s, this idea of like missile launches potentially leading to the end of the world.
Right. Well, and that's the like pseudo UN council or whatever is like trying to like come to sort of some kind of peace agreement. And then even like when Bruce is like seducing Kit Kat or she's seducing him or like whatever the fuck is happening, like he says something about like, we really should do something about this curtain between our countries. Yeah. And I was like, whoa.
But they also use terms
like political commentary in a kid's Batman movie.
Yeah. And it's obviously played for laughs, but in certain respects it is kind of, I mean, it's played for laughs, but it's serious in the sense that it's responding to the politics of the day. Because at some point, like, Bruce calls himself a capitalist, and I think he uses term like bourgeois, and I forget exactly what he says, but he says something about like, the bourgeois life in the United States or something. And it's really fascinating. It's like, holy shit, like those terms are like being explicitly used in this film.
Yeah.
And it kind of, again, with Catwoman as Kitka, it's this, you know, it's like typical American kind of fear of Cold War infiltration, of espionage, of subversion. But it's done, and I'm not saying it's done in any sort of way that it's critical of American foreign policy, but it is, I think, just kind of fascinating to find those politics in this film in that way. Yeah.
Well, I thought I like was super... wasn't expecting that, I guess. And like from the moment, I mean, I think I knew the moment that they like first show Kit Kat and she has like her Russian accent, I was like, oh, that's Catwoman. Like, you know, but also like, I think that was really interesting choice to make that her alter ego. Yeah. Like, I mean, it's like a fake alter ego, but like whatever, like it's still really fascinating.
Yeah. And that scene where he's like, oh, like, what are we going to do about this curtain between our countries? Like, is that in some sort of way an actual, let's say, I don't know, appeal to a peace process?
Right. Like Batman's our delegate for peace.
Who knows? I mean, hopefully not, because again, he is a bourgeois capitalist. Yeah. No, this film, but again, going back to kind of, it didn't feel like a slog. Like I was watching it, I was laughing along with it.
Right.
I had fun at moments. Not that I was entirely engaged with this, because, you know, every once in a while I sort of look to my phone, like fire up Twitter. But I did have fun watching it. I do have to say. And again, I had fun watching it because maybe my expectations for it were kind of low.
Oh, my expectations were very low.
Yeah. I'm not going to go back to this anytime soon, but maybe I shouldn't say I'm glad I watched it because I'm kind of like doing my job.
Yeah.
Like, Liam was like, no, we have to do this film. I'm like, okay, I'll watch it. But yeah, I had a decent time watching it.
Yeah. Maybe I missed this, and maybe this is ignorant of me to ask this question, but did you, at the beginning of the season, did you all lay out the Batman movies you were going to watch? Okay. I missed that episode.
So this was, you're not missing out on much, but this was definitely on, the docket. We're like, we should return to Batman 66.
I mean, I think it's good. I think it's necessary when you're talking about Batman because you're not going to do the television series because that's too complicated. So this is like you get the gist of the television series without doing the television series.
And Batman appeared on screen before in serialized versions in the 40s, maybe even in the 50s. But this is the first full feature-length Batman film. Mm-hmm. So it felt kind of essential, obviously, to do it in relationship to that. The other interesting thing for me watching this in relationship to how it deals with the villains, we never really talked about the villains, is how reminiscent it was of all of these like newer films where all of these fucking villains like have to be in it.
Oh, yeah. Where it has to be like a big ensemble cast or something.
It has to be a huge ensemble cast. And it was just kind of like, oh, okay. They were doing that even in the 1960s.
Yeah. Well, also, yeah, I mean, I didn't understand the motivation for like the four of them working together. Like they did like very little to like establish for a movie that was an hour and 44 minutes.
An hour and 44
they
minutes.
They did like very little to like establish like what was happening with them.
Yeah.
And like why they decided to work together other than that they like want to take over the world.
World domination. We don't know. At some point early on, Batman says like, oh my God, all four of them together.
It's like if it was one, it would be, if it was just two, it would just be Gotham. If it was three, it would be the United States. But four, that's the world. And you're like, oh, okay. I don't know how we got there, but sure.
We should also maybe briefly talk about how hideously racist the representations of the UN Security Council members are. Like just the worst kind of caricatures.
It's really rough.
Yeah, it's really rough. That was the one, and obviously the same thing also with like the Russian agents, but this, as you said, this horrible accent. But yeah, watching that, I was like, oh, these are not good representations of like the person from Spain, the person from France, the person from Nigeria. I was like, this is not a good scene.
It is horrible. I will say, though, I was surprised that they actually had them speaking their native languages. I was like pleasantly surprised that they didn't just like give them all horrible accents, but there was a lot of other horrible stuff happening for sure.
Well, and also there's this like really super like over the top caricature of like the Irish policeman, who I totally forgot.
Oh,
the character's name is, but I was like I totally forgot about that dude as well.
He's like O'Hara or something.
I think
because
so.
He's Irish.
Because he's Irish, yeah, and he has a really outlandish Irish.
He has like a thick Irish accent, not even like an Irish like American accent. Like he sounds like he's like just came over yesterday.
Yes, totally.
And I'm like, where's that come from?
Like, where's that guy's story?
Yeah.
Like, because I'm pretty sure he was born and raised here. Like, why is he speaking like that?
But did you notice, one of the things I noticed though, they show a map of quote unquote Gotham, and it's New York City.
Oh, it
is like actually New York City.
When was that?
They're talking about like where one of the boats are, like one of the submarine,
or the submarine,
something, and the Commissioner Gordon and O'Hara, and they're looking at this map and they have all these little like flags or whatever, and I'm like, that's Manhattan, that's Long Island. And then at some point they like it's like the Gotham River or something, but at some point they definitely like the East River, and I'm like, guys, we're in Gotham.
It would have been better if it was the Gowanus Canal.
Yeah, they're like, oh yeah, we're in the Gowanus Canal right now, and
all we need to do is make the Gowanus Canal raise up the Superfund site that it is, and its waters will destroy the rest of the city.
It's
not far from the truth. Yeah,
it's not far from the truth.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was interesting that they, because there's always like, is Gotham New York, and then there's actually like a fucking map of New York. I'm like, you guys couldn't like rig together some like phony
fake
thing.
map.
Yeah.
It was outside of their budget.
Apparently.
So anything else, Kel, about this majestic film?
Well, not necessarily about the film itself, but I wanted to say something more about is it Wortham? Is that the guy
Frederick,
who
I
writes
believe.
the...
Yeah, The Seduction of the Innocent.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting that, which I don't think I knew this, but that he like so that he pointed out how like blatant he thought the like homoeroticism was, and like how obvious, like he says it's like a fantasy life for homosexuals. And I think, I don't want to say that like it lends like legitimacy to the gayness of Batman and Robin, but I think it's something interesting when you're doing a queer reading of something, or like I think, I talk about this in my own work, and I think Taurus talks about it a little bit too, or it might be actually be the other article, one of the articles. I read so much. Actually, I think it is in the other one. It's Medhurst, Batman, Deviance, and Camp, talking about sort of like when you don't have representations of queerness, you find them, you make them, like, and like you read into these characters, and like maybe there is something there, but like you want there to be more there because there's not that representation. So sort of like queering these things for yourself to see those representations. So I think it's interesting to have someone sort of like take such a like homophobic attack on it, is in some ways it like lends credibility to the fact that there is this like underlying like queerness and like homoeroticism between Batman and Robin. Like if you're like railing against it so much, like maybe that means there's actually something there. I don't know. I mean, I think there is absolutely something there, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, it's the distinction also between, let's say, pointing out the homoeroticism of it, and let's say then turning that homoeroticism into a homophobia or deploying it for homophobic reasons.
Right. Well, and I think, there's something different between saying like, oh, this is like homoerotic or homosocial, and saying like, this is gay.
Yes. No, yes. Very good. Because one of the things, I'm glad you said that too, because thinking about, let's say, reading the Batman franchise and this film in particular as like homoerotic, let's say, and about its kind of take on sexuality, I was like, oh, it's in many respects it's far more subversive to, again, like to think about, let's say, Batman's sexuality again on that spectrum, rather than simply pinning him down with any individual label in terms of sexuality, because of the openness of it in some sort of way might be more transgressive than simply saying like, oh yeah, he's a closeted gay man, or no, he's clearly straight. And just kind of letting that play of sexuality kind of like unfold. Yeah. And letting then those like interpretations, like those modes of desire kind of, I mean, naturally might be too strong of a word or the wrong word, but letting them arise in relationship to the text. Yeah.
Which I think that like, I think in a lot of ways in like, not just in Batman, but in like films of this time and like earlier stuff, like, it allows for like so much more like interpretation and so much more like nuance for desire and that sort of thing. And I think, and to be more transgressive and all this sort of stuff. And that when you have like a blatantly like gay, not necessarily like queer character, that like it takes out a lot of the like, I don't know, the more like subversive elements to it, I think. Yeah. If that makes sense, that like you're like sanitizing it in some sort of way. Yeah. And like I think that like leaving it sort of like up in the air and like to interpretation and all this sort of stuff like creates more possibility.
No, yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah. So just quickly also, because you've done research on this, what's going on, and you don't, obviously it's not a test, but can you maybe just give us a feel for what's going on, let's say, in queer cinema at the time? Not obviously just 1966, maybe a couple of years before or after.
I mean, there's a lot of like Warhol stuff happening at the time. I mean, like my own research, like Flesh is put out by Warhol, but is actually Paul Morrissey, comes out in 1968, I think. Okay. And so like some of his films that are like slightly before that is like Blowjob.
Right. What year's Blowjob?
It's just like, I want to say it's like 64, 65.
Okay. In the wheelhouse.
It's like right around there. Man, I'm like blanking on anything that is not Warhol right now. Like his like pop art has like infiltrated my brain.
Well, it's also, I mean, yeah, no, I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about too was, and it's been a while since I've read it, so the years are a little bit off for me, and maybe you can clarify, but thinking about, for example, like Delaney in Times Square Red, Times Square Blue, cruising like the movie theaters in Times Square, and thinking about what years he was doing that. Like, would that have been like the late 60s, or was that like in its early 70s?
I want to say, yeah, I think what he's talking about like is 70s, although Delaney has been like cruising New York like as long as he's been here, so like it's certainly in the late 60s. So it could be, but I mean, Times Square is like hopping at the time for sure, and there's a lot of that stuff is happening then.
I guess my interest or my general questioning is kind of just this intersection between, let's say, again, like the homoeroticism and like the mainstream, let's say, homoeroticism of a film like this,
right,
and the more, let's say, hidden or closeted experiences of like queer cinema that obviously are being circulated and people are watching these films and talking about them and writing about them, but they're not mainstream in any sort of fucking way, of course.
Well, and also Boys in the Sand, which is like the first like mainstream gay porn, is like 68, so it's like right around there. It like predates Deep Throat, and was a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
So like there's definitely like, I feel like a lot of that stuff is sort of, I don't know, I don't want to say like hitting its peak, but there's definitely like there's stuff happening.
Yeah, it's in the air.
It's in the air.
Yeah, it's there, even though it's obviously still like very much in many respects hidden.
It's very, in many respects it's like hidden underground. I mean, I think again, like Boys in the Sand's a couple years after this, but I think I just feel like I always have to mention it because it's the first porn of any kind to be reviewed by Variety magazine, and it's the first I believe to be advertised by the New York Times, and for it to be a gay porn to be the first of like both of those is like kind of a big fucking deal. I don't know. Anyway, so there's gay stuff happening.
Have you done zine work on that one?
It's in my Times Square zine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Which there are very limited copies left if people want them.
Well, I mean, we were going to plug your work, but anything else? I mean, I don't think I have anything else to say about this film other than that it's really, it's something.
It's definitely something.
The ducks, he doesn't kill the ducks.
He doesn't kill the ducks. That scene is like, so he has, for folks who haven't seen it, he has this bomb that he's like trying to get rid of, and he's like running all around the docks, and he like runs out, he like tells all the people to like flee this bar, and then he like runs out, and there's like a baby, and then there's nuns, and then there's ducks, and then there's babies again,
like
and
a
then,
marching band at some point.
Oh, there's a marching band and like all this stuff, but he doesn't kill anybody, and he doesn't kill the ducks
because he's a hero. Yeah.
He's a hero.
It's funny too, because after that scene, Robin says something along the lines of like, "Oh, hey, why'd you save that bar of drunks?"
Oh yeah, he like totally.
And Batman's like, "Well, just because they're drunks, Robin, doesn't mean that they deserve to be blown up by a fucking bomb."
He says something like they're still human or something like that, and I'm like, whoa. Like, also, one more thing I wanted to say. Early in the film, they make a point to say that Batman and Robin are not vigilantes, and that they are deputized by the police department. Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting because that's his whole thing, is like he's a fucking rich dude vigilante, right? Like, so they're trying to like legitimize him, and they even make some comment like vigilantism is like bad. And again, it's for kids, I get it, like, but I thought that was really interesting that they like made a point of like doing that. Yeah,
they've been that part of it has been sanitized.
Yeah,
like they're just cops pretty much.
Yeah, they're like fancy wearing cops, fancy outfit wearing cops.
Which is another really campy and ridiculous thing about it too, because all of like their equipment is just, except for like the Batmobile, is like parked in public. So when they like have to go on like the Batcopter, they just drive to where like the Batcopter is parked, or they get on like on a Bat boat and it's just at the dock.
Also, when Robin and Alfred are tailing Kit Kat and Bruce on the date, they do it in the Batmobile. Like, does nobody see you?
Nobody sees them. No, it's a real, like, there's only like 5,000 people living in Gotham City. It's a big city, but it's remarkably uninhabited.
Apparently.
It's because of the rents are just so fucking absurd. Just a whole bunch of like
rent is too damn high.
Yeah, the rent is too damn high. A whole bunch of like Silicon Valley bros. That's it.
I mean, yeah, it seems that way.
Although now I would not mind a vigilante just walking through the streets of San Francisco, like beating the shit out of like Google, like CEOs. I mean, that sounds like actually kind of a vigilante.
Yeah, I could like sucker punching some Google folks. Yeah, I mean, it'd be a
destroying those Google buses, man. Fuck those Google buses.
Yeah. But like, you know, like all the people on top, not our poor workers.
Of course not. So any yeah, I guess that's it. Right?
I don't know. I don't have anything else to say.
Liam's not here, so he can't be like, no, actually, you're missing out on this. So Kel, do you want to plug your amazing work?
Sure, why not? So yeah, I make zines about queer sailors, which, as we said, there's a lot of semen in this movie. And
More ways than one.
More ways than one. And also have one about porn and sex work in Times Square in the 60s and 70s. You can find all my stuff at hellotheresailor.etsy.com.
Yeah. And we'll put a link to Kel's amazing work in the metadata, so you can find it there.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So I think we did it. I think we survived without Liam, even though...
I hope so.
Oh, Liam.
Liam's going to listen and be like, what is this garbage? No, I think we did great.
We did great. Yeah. Well, let's see what the file sounds like. But... I was George Fragopoulos.
I was Kel Karpinski.
And this was...
Uberbusters.